Hey, good afternoon. Vinnie Mirchandani here. Real pleasure to have Paul Wright with us. He's a Welshman in Detroit, in the Detroit area, enjoying the sunshine for a change there. Paul, welcome aboard. He's a CIO at Accuride, which is a supplier, big supplier in the auto industry. So all kinds of vehicles, campers, emergency vehicles. Accuride does business with a lot of different vehicle manufacturers. Paul, welcome aboard. Tell us a little about yourself and Accuride.
Well, thanks for having me, Vinny. Yeah, my name's Paul Wright. I'm the CIO at Accuride Corporation. So Accuride, as you mentioned, is predominantly in the commercial vehicles industry, actually, but globally. But we do also service in Europe the passenger car market, and then we service the off-highway market with wheels and wheel end components globally. So we've got facilities really across the world, which has obviously led to some interesting times during the recent crisis around COVID. Yeah, I think we're seeing green shoots, at least I hope so.
Well, Paul, hopefully I know the UK has been pretty badly affected, and Michigan was also fairly affected. Hopefully you and the family have done okay, and your employees.
Yeah. So my family here, we're in Oakland County, which was one of the hardest hit counties initially. I think really, possibly that's because the automotive industry is such a connected supply chain, and we have so many people traveling in and out from the big three here, that it's fairly logical that this would have been one of the epicenters of the crisis. And then, I had a pretty funny experience. So I was actually on a flight to Germany, and I woke up. And I woke up to, I don't know, maybe 100 text messages from various people. One of the last ones coming from my wife saying, "You really better think about turning around." And so I'm like, what happened? And so I was apparently in the air while President Trump was making a speech about closing the borders. And at that time, it was a very fluid situation. But fortunately, the company had backed me up and, already got me booked on flights to come back. And so I basically spent 20 hours in an airplane and then came home and quarantined immediately upon return. So that was more exciting than I would have liked, I would say. In terms of the UK, obviously all of my family is still there. Everyone's fine, which is good. My sister and her husband are both teachers, and so they've actually had to be in a really weird place from their job work experiences. Maybe even stranger than mine. In terms of having to go in and teach a really modified curriculum to a much smaller group of people for the emergency workers. So certainly it's been challenging, but yeah, so far everyone's okay. But still being careful, obviously.
Well, so let's look at the positive side. You ended up with a few frequent flyer miles, Delta miles.
Indeed, I did. Indeed, I did. And you know what? And I think it's really good that certainly the travel partners that I have. I fly a lot with Delta. Detroit is a Delta hub, and I do a lot with Hilton. And the fact that they've sort of rolled over status for all of their members to next year was certainly very much appreciated, because even though it's becoming safer, I just don't think that I'm going to be traveling that much for the next few months here, at least.
Well, I interviewed the CIO of Delta, and I'll send you that. He'll probably change your mind. He assured me the HEPA filters and so on make it cleaner than what you and I breathe. So, Paul, in all the doom and gloom, we've seen some amazing acrobatics, right? We've seen at least GM and Ford and Tesla jump in and try to make ventilators. We've seen 3M quadruple capacity. But things are like the last mile logistics, banks processing 4 million small business loans in a month. I mean, just numbers are staggering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the media doesn't talk so much about business heroics, but there have been amazing business heroics also. What have you seen in your customers or in the Detroit area that make you go, wow, I didn't think this was doable?
I can really only speak well to our experience at Accuride. So as I mentioned, we're predominantly in the heavy vehicles industry, supplying wheels and wheel end components, and so if trucks stop moving in America, that's really bad news. And so our efforts has really been on how can we continue to support the trucking industry, because we're not just a supplier to the original vehicle builders, the OEMs, we're also a supplier into the aftermarket. And so as such, if we don't make parts, then maybe the trucks can't run. If the trucks can't run, then the food can't move and the supplies can't move and everything else that everyone needs all over the country doesn't get there. So, certainly the big thing for us has been trying to make sure that our customers know that we're there for them, that even in changing circumstances, we're gonna do what it takes to get the parts that they need to where they need them as quickly as possible. So America just keeps on running.
Well, thank you for your service. I talked to your colleague, Dennis Hodges at Antiva, about 6 weeks ago when Detroit was shut down.
Yeah.
You have reopened since. So tell us about the reopening protocols and what kind of caution and what is the new workplace hygiene. Talk a little bit about how the reopening has gone.
So as I mentioned, I mean, while we've had some level of rolling shutdowns across our factories, as we've needed to do that, we've also had to continue to run. And so, we do have a factory in Jining in China. And so, that factory started to get impacted by this in January of this year, right around Chinese New Year. And so we were actually one of the first factories to reopen inside the province, under very, very strict audits from the local authorities. So we actually got the chance to learn a lot of lessons around screening, about contact tracing of employees, around regular temperature checks, around, thorough disinfection of equipment between shifts. And so there was a number of lessons that we learned very quickly in Jining. And so that actually acted as a springboard for us across the various facilities. One of the big things is obviously making sure that we then had really, really good communications. I mean, that's always important for business, but I think hyper important in terms of being consistent in terms of our approach of how do we approach the different factories and our factory workers, what's our messaging going to be like to our customers. And so we quickly set up dashboards so we could have a rolling cadence of tracking. Okay, what do we know about our customers? What do we know about our suppliers? What do we know about our employees? And just making sure that we're sharing all of the best practices and all of the knowledge across those various places as quickly as we could. as our customers have started to come up, really probably the big thing that I see is how connected the supply chain is, and which of our customers had really embraced lean, and what that had done to them. Because if they had supply chains where they were holding very, very minimal inventory of the components they needed, if some of their suppliers weren't ready to go the same way, then they've had rolling shutdowns, and it only takes one component on a truck to shut down the whole line, and then the whole supply chain stops again. And so there's been a lot of I guess the supply chain waltz, for want of a better way of saying it, where it's like, quick, slow, quick, slow. As I know that certain components coming out of China were initially restricted, and so that created a stoppage. And then as the factories have started to come up, for ones where there's been sequence manufacturing specifically, and particularly where there's been a high labor content in sequence manufacturing, things like wiring harnesses, for instance, I think that has been really troublesome for the OE guys to get their arms around. So, we are monitoring daily. We're having, along with our information dashboards for each of the facilities, we've also got daily calls where each plant is doing a round robin. But we're also bringing in the corporate supply chain teams, logistics teams, and customer sales teams to just make sure that everyone is hearing all of the information. And so we can make sure that we continue to do our best to not be the guy creating the bottleneck, right? I mean, that's the last thing you want to do.
Right. So as CIO, tell us about, it sounds like you're running multiple supply chain scenarios, you're running multiple shop floor scenarios, you got a blend of cloud applications, you got people working from home.
Yeah.
Surprised you have any hair left. Tell us what your experience has been, cloud versus on-premise, and how have your I guess your planning and scenario systems fared in this? Because quite often the execution systems seem to work okay, but planning can be a little iffy. So talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So I think that we'd started on our cloud journey around 6-7 years ago, and so in North America at least, we're getting close to being cloud natives, I think. And so work from home for us just was less of an event than I hear about for other people. So we'd already set up with multi-factor authentication to access all of our data from wherever in the world and whatever time zone, right? So we were kind of agnostic around that. The biggest thing that we had to do in North America was actually make sure that we set up more people to use the phone client directly on their computer, connected to our cloud telephony. But that was really it. Turning on a couple of flags to allow more people to go from unknown IPs than we normally would. But, on a case-by-case basis, we were able to see it and just deal with it. Now, contrast that with our recent acquisition in Europe, which was all on-premise, so a combination of SAP for ERP. We've been in process of migrating all of their Microsoft products from on-premise to cloud. Fortunately, we got a lot of the way along there. Otherwise, I think we would have been in worse shape. And then, and in both geographies, the engineering applications being on-premise. What we found was that all of my team were immediately sort of, how do we enable more people to work in Europe? And so we were spinning up additional VPN connections, spinning up additional paths. And so we actually gave a bunch of the guys in Europe and Asia a way to come through the VPN in North America and then hop on one of the direct tunnels that we had over to the various plants. So really that sort of that dual hub and spoke system that we'd sort of set up worked really well. And we went from, I think that they historically only had 20 synchronous VPN connections to we had, I think, 450 up and running within about a week. And, you know, just figuring out, okay, well, how do we manage that? And just flexing some of our old muscles, but then combining it with new ways of doing things, getting more people into applications like Microsoft Teams, just as different ways of communicating, making sure that people knew the way that we could cascade through various levels of communication while trying not to kill our cell phone bill for the company, right? Because, I mean, you know, everyone would naturally say, oh, well, I'll just call people on this. And, you know, it's weird. The most expensive thing you can do on a cell phone now is actually take a phone call, I think. It's data.
Especially
So
internationally, right?
Yeah. It's absolutely internationally. And so, you know, we're just trying to make sure that because the business is way down, right? And so we've got to make sure that we're conserving our money, but still being able to provide the ability for people to work from home. In terms of people going back to the offices now, I think that all companies, if they really step back and they think, okay, well, what was effective working from home? What does the future look like? How successful have we been at remote collaboration? Because we're a manufacturing company, I don't think that we make money by having offices, right? I mean, you're going to need some levels of office spaces connected to the plant. I get that. You're going to need times where you need an actual face-to-face meeting, not just a virtual face-to-face meeting, right? But those conversations are becoming fewer and more further apart than they would have been. You know, I think that this has maybe turned a switch in terms of realization to a lot of companies. Certainly for me and my team, you know, I've been really proud of how productive we've been in terms of getting stuff done. And there's a real balance between, you know, the knowledge transfer via osmosis that you get by proximity, right? Versus being able to focus on projects and on tasks versus the distraction of someone walking in and saying, oh, can you help me with this? Or can you help me with this? And so I'm not going to say that we're 100% right on the balance. I don't know that any company is, but I think we're taking the time to look at it. So I think our approach is, if you want to go back in the office, we're going to, that's fine. But here's all the precautions that you have to take when you do that. Or you can continue to work from home if you are productive from home, and please work with your supervisor on what that looks like, right? So those policies, I think that we're actively reviewing as an organization to say, what should the future look like? And it probably looks closer to what we're doing today than what we did last year.
Yeah, talking to other companies, it is a little more complex because there's social isolation issues and so on that have not been completely looked at, you know, because we've been so focused on protection, but staying at home is not exactly it's not a free lunch. But let's talk a little more about proximity, right? So there is growing sentiment of bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. or Europe, right? Is that just political talk, or are you sensing that there is genuine, global realignment going on?
So I think that I think companies are going to have to look, and we already know that companies are going to look at what is a way that my supply base can ensure that they've got multiple ways to supply me, right? So will that involve some level of nearshoring? It might. I think it will, and I think that is not just a US. I think that's going to be something of a global phenomenon, right? I mean, I know Japan is very actively investing in bringing manufacturing back to Japan that had gone to China, and they're gonna fund companies to do that, right? So I think that's good. I think that we were already through various other political reasons moving towards more of an environment where there was potentially less trade on some goods because we wanted to be making more inside our individual countries. And you can say that's right or wrong, but I certainly think that was a path we were headed down anyway. I think with the revisions to the NAFTA agreement, there was obviously some impetus that was going to come out of that in terms of the amount of labor content that was going to be required for imports too. So I think that all of those things together certainly drive a little bit of impetus towards US manufacturing, which, and not just US, maybe US, Canada, Mexico. But I genuinely think that's a good thing, right? I mean, I worked for a company where the guy who founded the company basically said, if you ain't making it and you ain't growing it, then you ain't doing nothing, right? And I'm paraphrasing. I think the language was a little more choice, but
on that, do you see, to me, the constraint there could be our young people. We don't have as many trade schools, blue-collar schools. Is that going to be an issue, or do you think the supply chain of talent will rise to meet the needs?
Well, I think that, people talk a lot about automation as being a job killer, right? I see it as it can also be something of a de-skilling exercise. And so, some of the complexity that used to be tribal knowledge that required specific set of skills, maybe that's not the case anymore. And maybe, it's how a lower skilled person can work directly with mechanization, automation, in terms of the manufacturing process. So I think that there's less of an impact with that, but there's still definitely a need for a focus on empowering people around trades versus I'll be honest with you. I think we got enough lawyers and accountants in the world, right?
Yeah,
we're probably gonna.
Four-year education has been oversold for the last 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, there's people like Mike Rowe that that speak a lot more eloquently
Right.
and with more knowledge on this subject. But you know, I think that there is a disruption coming to the educational system, right? Because as much as every other industry, this practice of work from home, this study from home, it basically turned every academic institution into the University of Phoenix, right? And so, at what point is it rational for me to pay $100,000 for the same content that I can pay $10,000 for? And I'm oversimplifying. I know I am, but by the same token, there's not going to be as good a reason, I think, for charging those types of fees.
Yeah.
If the learning model has significantly changed. Certainly, we, as a nation, I think we have to think about how do we come out of an educational practice, and it should be a balance between, you know, trade type activities and academic type activities, without the level of debt that people have, because that level of debt just creates bad decisions, right? I don't think that as a nation, you know, we should just be investing in paying debt, right? I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think we want to set people on a path to their own wealth creation, and let them have investments, and let them have investment in tangible things, right, or tangible experiences in their lives, where that becomes cyclical in terms of creating more opportunities for more wealth, right? I mean, you know, I and again, I'm no politician, right?
Well, it's a little more complex. You know, I spent time in Amazon warehouses, highly automated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they pay their employees very well. And yet, you know, the media is reporting, oh, it's miserable conditions and so on. So I think as a country, we'll have to evolve not just the education system, but also mindset that, hey, this is the new normal. You know, there's going to be a lot of automation, and workers will have.
Yeah, you know, I think part of the thing with Amazon, right, is they're really good at measuring efficiency of what they do. They're probably better at measuring that than almost any other company. And certainly the work that they're doing lends itself to measurement, right? And so, you know, when you as a person get measured constantly, and you are brought, you know, and the bad is brought up and the good is brought up, right? I think that's it. Certainly it would be difficult for me to take, right? I'm not saying it's wrong, right? Because I'm all about efficiency. I mean, I think that's what we all have to be about, is doing things better. But when that's shoved in your eye, I mean, that's difficult to deal with, right? It doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means that it's different than people's expectations. You can't go from working at a place where you're not being tracked, where you know, you can do this or you can do that, and you know, I think for the most part people are good and people want to do a good job, right? And so, you know, you go from doing what you think is a good job and it's all about relationships and blah blah blah, to going to a different environment where it's purely about numbers and your efficiency of doing these tasks that have been assigned to you, and we will measure you like to the second in how you do in performing those tasks. Like, wait, what? No, I am offended.
Well,
so I think that's a lot of it, right? And
Paul, you know, not every. That's why we have 900 occupations in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? There is something for everybody, and there are some people who don't mind being measured. There are others who will revolt against that. Hopefully, we'll work through all that.
Well, but the big thing is then providing opportunities for people to be successful who approach work differently, right? And I think that you're right. There's 900 occupations, and let's make sure that we find a way to let people work, because I think for the most part, people want to be productive. I think that a lot of the stress around this whole COVID situation is people don't want to be crammed up. They don't want to, I mean, for me, if I was just sat doing nothing, I think my head would explode right now. I've been busier than ever in terms of, as we're going back and making sure that we've got all of our projects accelerating right now, and also making sure that everyone has what they need to do what they need to do from wherever they are in the world, right? And so, for our financial guys, the level of stress on them has been just enormous.
Sure.
As every time they create a forecast, it's wrong. Now, that's always true. As soon as you publish a forecast, it's wrong, right? Everywhere, for everything. But I mean, it's how much it's getting wrong right now, because instead of being like 3 to 5% off, you're 30 to 50% off, because the world flips upside down and goes back and forth like this. And how do you deal with that, right?
So Mr. CIO, I'm going to make you an economist.
Yeah.
Let's talk about forecasts. Do you expect a V recovery, sharp rebound? Do you expect a U, gradual recovery? Do you expect a W, up and down by geography, flare-ups? Or do you expect an L, which is, my God, it's going to be dead for a while?
I actually think that will be a little bit of an L approach in a U, I think. I think that even coming out of this, I think that public confidence is shaken, right? And at the end of the day, if consumer confidence is shaken, that's going to be a problem. And you see that in terms of all of every sale and deal that you're no doubt getting blitzed with the way that I am from every store, because no one's buying anything, because I think everyone's just uncertain. And you're in the middle of an election year. So I don't see, until we have clarity around that some people are going to make the next big choice of the next edition, or the next house move, or the next, et cetera, et cetera. And again, I see green shoots, and that's good. But we've gone from a class 8, so your 16-wheeler sort of trucks, right? We've gone from an environment where there was close to 300,000 of those last year, and we're thinking it's probably going to be about 140,000 this year, right? And those are significant changes.
Absolutely. Paul, I've interviewed about 20 industries, executives in 20 industries, and it's fascinating how some of them are just exploding, right? So I interviewed a small bank, and they grew 25% in a month because they've done so many PPP loans.
Yeah.
Anil Butchery at Workday told me they actually ran a 1 million person payroll this month. One of their biggest, you can imagine who that is.
Mm-hmm.
RV sales are up. Residential closings, the mortgage industry is on fire. So
that's interesting to me.
I've been seeing all these patterns, and then on the other hand, you see, poor Delta is at 5%. Like they've dropped so much. So I think it's a very fragmented, conflicting data points are coming out of the industry. But so it may end up being a U. I'm an optimist, so hopefully you'll see more V's than U's. But
do you think that there's a certain amount of this which just continues? I mean, do you think that overall we're going to have less business travel as a result of this type of thing? I mean, because that's obviously that's a driver for so many things, both directly and indirectly, in terms of money being invested into the economy. And I just, I think to a certain extent, customers don't want to see you at their facilities right now, right?
Right. I think business travel is going to be challenged for a while, right? The consumer travel, surprisingly, within state, not flights, driving, given gas prices, given people, desire to get out, is actually, there's more. There's a firm in Detroit that tracks highway traffic. It's actually almost back to pre-COVID levels in some cities. So, I think that's what I mean. I think we're gonna. I'm writing a piece called Topsy Turvy Day, and it's like things that where you think things won't be bright, they're looking bright, and other areas are looking completely dead. So we'll have to work through evening it out over the next few months.
Yeah. I that's the thing. I just don't think there's one answer. I think it's going to be an industry by industry, and I do think that there will be a geography by geography element to this, right? Because I just think that this will continue to move around until there is a vaccine, and while it does, people will get more or less nervous. In my hometown, Rochester, the restaurants opened up yesterday, right? And I was downtown because my son went, and he's just, his kung fu classes have just started back up, right? And so, but not inside the dojo, in the dojo parking lot, right? Which is okay, that's fine. He's still getting the chance to learn the things that he would learn differently, but he's still getting. But there's one hot dog place called La Puma's, and they've been closed for months now, and I mean there must have been 200 people in line for a hot dog at lunchtime yesterday, because that place is like an institution around here. Mm-hmm. And I think people are desperate to get back to, what, I want this back in my life. I'm not ready to give that up, right? And so there will be demand around that. I think there's a lot of pent up frustration, and that frustration can be channeled multiple ways, right? That frustration can be channeled into, as soon as I can go and do something, I'm going to go and do it, or it's being channeled potentially into
protests,
into protests, right? So it's these side effects
that's the I think I talked to a county executive.
Yeah.
Said, Vinnie, we will soon realize the social cost of isolation. It's not a free lunch. We've told everybody to stay at home. It's not a free lunch. So
right.
So thank you so much, and stay healthy, stay safe, and keep smiling. Thank you.
I'll do that. Thanks, Vinnie.